Hello, I'm Frank Gaffney. I acted as an Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Ronald Reagan and currently serve as the President of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. I've spent my entire adult life analyzing and addressing challenges to our national security, and I want to share with you what amounts to a short course on a threat to our country as serious as any America has ever encountered. This course is fundamentally an effort to connect the proverbial dots, all of which are in the public domain. Some of the insights I've gained through remarkable first-hand experiences. Now, there is surely much more and highly relevant data that has yet to come to light. It's our hope that this course will serve as a wake-up call, ensuring that such information emerges without further delay and makes possible the corrective actions that are urgently required, particularly on the part of conservatives who have, as we shall see, been specifically targeted. This 10-part course is an exercise in connecting the proverbial dots. These dots are drawn from a wealth of publicly available information that, when understood not simply as individual worrying data points, but as elements of a larger whole, has tremendously ominous implications for America and for her people. The briefing starts with a discussion of the nature and source of the threat, a totalitarian Islamic doctrine known as Shariah, and the organization most aggressively advancing it, the Muslim Brotherhood. Next, we'll examine the Brotherhood's operations in this country and the ominous organizational infrastructure it has created to conduct them. Third, we'll review in detail how the American right, the conservative movement and Republican Party, has been targeted by the Brotherhood and other Islamists. Fourth, we'll consider in detail one of the most successful facets of this influence operation aimed at subverting the right. Fifth, we'll look at a number of nominally conservative organizations being employed to great effect by Islamists and their enablers for the purpose of subverting the American right from within. In Part 6, we'll consider how several individuals with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood or other Islamists have been groomed to run for office as Republicans. Next, we will explore how various agendas espoused by the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamists have been advanced in Republican and conservative circles in the recent past, and, in some cases, how they are proceeding even today. Eighth, we'll consider how the precedents created with the Muslim Brotherhood and its allies' successes in penetrating and subverting the right have translated into profound and insidious Islamist influence inside the Obama administration. In this connection, we will examine, first, illustrative examples of individuals with Islamist ties in key positions with Team Obama. Ninth, we'll address how past precedents and current personnel are translating into Obama policies that are aligned with those of the Muslim Brotherhood and its allies, and profoundly inimical to the Constitution of the United States and/or the security and other vital interests of its people. We'll conclude with a brief assessment of what can and must be done to counter and reverse the threat posed by Shariah, the civilization jihad aimed at insinuating it inside our country, and the dangerous inroads made to date by the Muslim Brotherhood, other Islamists, and their enablers. The first section explains what Shariah is, according to the authorities and institutions of Islam, and as promoted most aggressively by an organization called the Muslim Brotherhood, also known as the Ikhwan in Arabic. It's important to note that not all Muslims adhere to the dictates of Shariah. Many, particularly in America, have no interest in living according to its requirements or in subjecting others to them. The question is whether such Muslims and the rest of us will be able to contend with and successfully counter the ambitions of Sharia adherent followers of Islam. This course is intended to increase the chances of that outcome. Part 1. An introduction to the supremacist threat doctrine known as Shariah and the Muslim Brotherhood's role in promoting it. This course is informed by research sponsored by the Center for Security Policy, a Washington, D.C.-based not-for-profit national security advocacy organization I've had the privilege of running since its founding in 1988. In particular, it will draw on research that was conducted by 19 national security practitioners and other experts. They were asked to review critically and, where necessary, to challenge the conventional wisdom about a hostile ideology. In 1976, a similar exercise took an independent and critical look at U.S. government thinking about the then official line on Soviet communism, namely, that it must be appeased. That group became known as Team B to distinguish it from the U.S. government or Team A perspective. Team B warned that appeasement of the Soviet Union was reckless at a time when the Kremlin was combining its efforts to spread the ideology and domination of communism with vast military capabilities and aggressive influence operations around the globe. This robust alternative analysis had historic repercussions as its insights and recommendations became part of Ronald Reagan's Peace Through Strength platform for his 1976 bid for the White House. He very nearly defeated President Gerald Ford over the policy towards the Soviet Union that then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger called détente. He went on to beat Jimmy Carter with his Team B-like platform in 1980. And most importantly, President Reagan's Team B strategy brought about the destruction of the USSR and ended the Cold War on our terms. Another independent and equally objective analysis was needed to assess official thinking and policies with respect to today's ideological threat, Shariah. As a tribute to the path-breaking work of its inspiring predecessor, this group adopted the name Team B2. Team B2's report is entitled Shariah, the Threat to America. It is an authoritative resource for anyone seeking to understand and respond appropriately to that present and growing danger. Shariah the Threat can be obtained at Amazon.com as an ebook or as a free download at www.shariahthethreat.com. Among Team B co-authors, 3 have played prominent roles in the U.S. intelligence community. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin co-led the team, as did Lieutenant General Ed Soyster. Other prominent members included former Director of Central Intelligence Jim Woolsey and former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy, who served as the lead prosecutor in the trial of the Sharia-adherent Muslims who first tried to destroy the World Trade Center in 1993. We need to be clear at the outset about what Shariah is. In Arabic, Shariah literally means the path. It's seen by its adherents to be a complete way of life governing all aspects of their existence, from the personal, pietistic practice of their faith to how the world should be governed. Of particular relevance to this briefing are the attributes of Shariah that make it an instrument for totalitarian control in the political, military, and legal spheres. The good news is that today, hundreds of millions of Muslims around the world do not practice Islam in accordance with Shariah. That is the case with most American Muslims. The bad news, however, is that, as we shall see, they are under great and growing pressure to conform to Shariah's dictates and to join their co-religionists who seek to impose that doctrine on everyone else. Shariah is a doctrine that was developed and codified over several hundred years following the death of Islam's founder and prophet, Muhammad. The sources of Shariah are the Quran and the Sunnah. The latter is made up of the Sirah and the Hadiths, which provide authoritative and sacralized renderings, respectively, of the life and sayings of the faith's founder and prophet, Muhammad. Over the centuries, Shariah has been interpreted and applied through rulings of leaders known as caliphs, by fatwas or judgments issued by clerics, and via scholarly works by influential academic institutions, such as Al-Azhar University in Cairo. Sharia is often thought of as Islamic law. As practiced by the authorities of Islam, however, it goes well beyond a traditional legal code to control literally every aspect of the life of Muslims. Where Sharia is dominant, it dictates the behavior and treatment of non-Muslims as well. Some of Sharia's more appalling attributes include relegating women to an inferior status and subjecting them to often barbaric mistreatment, obliging them, in the name of modesty, to conceal themselves, for example, in burqas, aptly described as mobile jails, stoning women should they be accused of adultery, even in cases of rape, unless the victim can secure the testimony of 4 males confirming the crime, commanding the murder of homosexuals, mandating holy war or jihad, requiring the use of zakat or tithing to support jihadists and their families, condoning murder carried out in the name of restoring family honor as a means of enforcing religious and cultural norms, encouraging the mutilation of females' genitals as a particularly grotesque means of dominating women. A doctrine that condones or mandates such practices is patently incompatible with the Constitution of the United States. That's also evident insofar as Sharia precludes unalienable and constitutionally guaranteed rights. Some nonetheless insist that Sharia and the Constitution are compatible. There are only 2 possibilities with respect to such individuals. Either they are ignorant of the true nature of Sharia, or they are deliberately misrepresenting the truth about it. The latter is not only permissible under Sharia, it is obligatory, a practice known as lying for the faith, or taqiyya in Arabic. In cases where prominent Muslim community leaders make these claims, they almost certainly are practicing taqiyya. One need look no further than the places where Sharia is practiced as the law of the land to confirm its incompatibility with our rights, values, and civilization. These include Saudi Arabia, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, areas in Afghanistan and Pakistan controlled by the Taliban, and the Gaza Strip under Hamas's control. The practice of Sharia in such places also gives lie to the contention that this doctrine is undefined, or whatever one wants it to be. Women and others suffering under Sharia's brutal repression in these lands are under no such illusion. In fact, the nature of Sharia is fixed, in accordance with the Quranic practice of the Deen, or way, of Allah. This practice is comprehensively and definitively depicted in, among other authoritative reference works, Reliance of the Traveler. In Muslim nations where something other than canonical Sharia governs, it is a matter of differing levels of enforcement, not evidence of alternative, equally legitimate Sharia codes. Unfortunately, the numbers of people subjected to Sharia is growing. Sharia's adherents are currently seeking to fully enforce Sharia codes nominally in place elsewhere. An opportunity to do so presented itself with the advent of the so-called Arab Spring. While many of the millions who supported the overthrow of the region's autocrats may have hoped for freedom, in country after country, they are going to replace one form of repression with that dictated by Sharia. Such countries include Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya. In the near future, other nations likely to fall formally under Sharia's sway are Syria, Jordan, Yemen, and the West Bank. In fact, Sharia's adherents aspire to bring their doctrine not only to Muslim nations that make up the Dar al-Islam, or Islamic world. They believe it is God's will that they impose it as well over the non-Muslim world, the so-called Dar al-Harb. That would include Nigeria and other parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, and the Western Hemisphere, including the United States. The organization that is the driving force behind such ambitious efforts to spread Shariah is the Muslim Brotherhood, or Ikhwan in Arabic. But what exactly is the Muslim Brotherhood? It's been described as a largely secular, nonviolent, and attractive alternative to terrorism-wielding Islamist groups like Al-Qaeda. Are such characterizations accurate? It was started in 1928 by an Egyptian named Hassan Banna, who was furious over the declining fortunes of Islam at the time and the dismantling after World War I by Kemal Ataturk of the last caliphate in Turkey. Al-Banna declared, quote, "It is the nature of Islam to dominate, not to be dominated, to impose its law on all nations and to extend its power to the entire planet." Unquote. The Brotherhood has been, from its inception, a disciplined, highly organized, and ruthless group, rooted in the Salafist traditions of Sharia-adherent Islam. Salaf means what came before and extols the purity of the original practice of the faith according to Muhammad and the first four rightly guided caliphs, also known as the Salafiyah, or righteous ancestors. The goals of the Muslim Brothers have always been clear. First, promote Sharia around the world and secure its triumph. And second, reconstitute the Islamic Empire, or Caliphate. To calibrate the Muslim Brotherhood, then, it has precisely the same objectives as do other Salafist groups like Al-Qaeda. In fact, Al-Qaeda, which literally translates as the foundation, has its roots in the Muslim Brotherhood and its ideology, which is derived from Sharia, the true foundation of global jihadism. What's more, Al-Qaeda has long been spiritually guided and is currently led by Ayman al-Zawahiri, who is himself a Muslim brother. And on February 23, 1998, 12 organizations and 5 individuals calling themselves the Global Jihad Front issued a proclamation declaring jihad against the Jews and the people of the cross. Zawahiri signed it as the Emir of Jihad Group in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood's Al-Jamia al-Islamiyah. He is the last surviving individual signer. As the Muslim Brotherhood's creed makes clear, it is fully prepared to engage in violent jihad to advance its supremacist agenda all over the world. Allah is our objective. The Prophet is our leader. The Quran is our law. Jihad is our way. Dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope. In short, the Muslim Brotherhood and other Salafist organizations disagree, if at all, only about tactics. The Ikhwan believes it must turn to violence only when the conditions are right. Until then, the Muslim Brotherhood will use what it calls civilization jihad techniques to achieve its objectives. As we'll shortly see, this stealthy form of holy war can be every bit as dangerous as the violent kind, particularly to open, tolerant, and free societies like ours. And where it is successful, civilization jihad creates conditions for the use of terrifying violence to finish the job, directed in the Quran, of making the infidel feel subdued. The next part of this course will explore how the Muslim Brotherhood is waging such a stealth jihad against the United States. In 2010, a new and aggressive supreme guide, Muhammad Badi, took the helm of the Ikhwan. Today, his organization is in place in more than 100 countries around the world, in some cases operating openly and others covertly. Note that this new logo for the Ikhwan, with this planet behind the group's crossed swords and other Quranic imagery, suggests the Brotherhood's rising conviction that its global triumph is at hand. One of the nations with a large and active Muslim Brotherhood presence is the United States. We will have much more to say shortly about the Ikhwan's activities in America. With the ascendancy of Mohammed Badi in 2010, the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda, which might be described as coopetition, as they work together as well as compete, entered a new and ominous phase. Specifically, it appears that their perceptions of the geostrategic conditions with respect to realizing their goals have come into alignment. In the summer of 2010, al-Qaeda signaled that the Brotherhood should recognize that the time had come to move beyond stealthy, pre-violent operations and to start bringing down Middle Eastern regimes that were not implementing Shariah and were aligned with its infidel enemies. The Brotherhood's newly elevated leader, Supreme Guide Mohammed Badi, established his organization's commitment to the Quranic justification for jihad when faced with fitna, variously interpreted as resistance, oppression, or mischief from the unbelievers, behavior that now includes the offense of Islamophobia. As one astute observer, Dr. Barry Rubin, has put it, Badi's declaration established that, quote, the Muslim Brotherhood is ready to move from the era of propaganda and base building to one of revolutionary action. By far, the most important was Hosni Mubarak's Egypt. After all, Egypt was not only the birthplace of the Muslim Brotherhood, it has the largest population of any Arab nation, it controls the strategic Suez Canal, it boasts a vast and modern American-supplied arsenal, and, not least, Egypt's peace treaty with Israel had long effectively precluded the resumption of regional hostilities aimed at destroying the Jewish state. While the Muslim Brotherhood was well established in Egypt for most of its existence there, its actual strength was obscured by the official hostility of successive governments and the role, out of the limelight, to which the Ikhwan was relegated. As regime opponents took to the streets in early 2011, the Muslim Brotherhood played its hand carefully. Initially, its operatives allowed secular, democratic youths to enjoy the greatest prominence. Over time, however, the Brotherhood asserted itself more and more. The Ikhwan's groups and political fronts inexorably emerged as the most disciplined, organized, and ruthless opposition forces, particularly after Mubarak was overthrown. After the military removed Mubarak from power, its Supreme Council made what amounted to a workable, if uneasy, separate peace with the Muslim Brotherhood. A symbolic and highly consequential manifestation of the accommodation between Egypt's military and the Muslim Brotherhood occurred on February 18, 2011. The ruling transitional junta dropped a 30-year ban on the return to Egypt of one of the world's most visible and influential Sharia authorities, Sheikh Youssef al-Qaradawi. Qaradawi, who is considered the Ikhwan's spiritual leader, has his own television program on Al Jazeera and routinely uses it to inveigh against the United States, Israel, and infidels more generally. He was named an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Qaradawi's return to Cairo on this occasion was triumphant and eerily reminiscent of the extraordinarily warm welcome given another cleric, Ayatollah Khomeini, when in 1979 he came home from exile in France and began his hijacking of the post-Shah political transition in Iran. The military permitted Qaradawi to use his address before a crowd of over 1 million to foment demands for Shariah. He declared that the army would support the Ikhwan, and vice versa. Qaradawi also called on Egyptians to join him in marching on Al-Quds, the name Arabs and other Muslims use to refer to Jerusalem, and to become shahadin, meaning martyrs willing to give their lives to assure the triumph of Shariah. A further indicator of the Brotherhood's intentions for the Egyptian Revolution came when a leader of the secular democratic opposition, Google executive Wael Ghonim, was rebuffed by Qaradawi's entourage when he tried to share the stage with the Islamist icon. By the time parliamentary elections took place in late 2011, Egypt's Muslim brothers had successfully mobilized their supporters and parlayed their organizational heft into votes and victories at the polls. Together with Salafists of other political stripes, they secured upwards of 75% in the 2 rounds of elections, ample votes to dictate the makeup and direction of the next Egyptian parliament, executive branch, and constitution. The Muslim Brotherhood's decisive victory in Egypt, together with its similar successes in 2011 in Tunisia and Libya, seemed to vindicate Mohammed Badi's calculation that the time had come for Islamists to overthrow governments elsewhere in the region. Particularly troubling in this regard are the latest signs that the toppling of autocrats in 2011 will give way to a similarly targeted campaign against the royal families of the region's kingdoms in 2012. For reasons developed in the next parts of this presentation, the Muslim Brotherhood's agenda here in America may prove even more dangerous, both to the future security and liberties of this country and the rest of the free world.